The superstar had always been confident. From a young age, they had a voice that people would stop and listen to. By the time they were in their 20s, they were already known everywhere. Their songs played on radios in every city, and their concerts were always packed. Fans screamed and cheered, throwing their hands in the air, waiting for the next note. The superstar walked on stage with a smile, waving at the crowd as if it were a routine. They were used to the lights, the applause, and the fame. It felt like the world had been made for them alone. The superstar lived in a world of perfect images. Cameras followed them wherever they went. Photographers waited outside their house, and fans sent gifts and letters in heaps. Interviews were everywhere, and everyone seemed to know their songs by heart. It was a life full of praise and admiration, but it was also a life under constant pressure. Every performance had to be perfect. Every note had to hit the right tone. There was no room for mistakes. Yet the superstar was confident. They believed in their talent. They believed in their power to captivate any audience. People often said the superstar was untouchable. Critics praised their voice and stage presence. Other singers sometimes felt nervous when performing in the same event. The superstar had this aura that made people stop and take notice. They were admired by young and old, rich and poor. Their songs could make people laugh, cry, or dance, sometimes all at once. Awards and trophies filled their homes, symbols of the hard work and talent that had brought them fame. Behind the stage, the superstar worked hard. They practiced for hours each day, perfecting every melody, every rhythm. Vocal coaches, choreographers, and managers surrounded them, guiding every step. Even with all the support, the superstar knew that talent alone wasn't enough. Confidence played a huge role. They had to walk onto every stage with a smile, believing they were the best. And so far, this belief had never failed them. One day, news arrived about a new talent competition that was gaining attention fast. It promised to find the next big voice, and many famous singers were invited to perform. The superstar was curious, but also confident. They knew the competition was important, but they were sure they would shine without any trouble. This was the world they knew well, a world where talent, practice, and experience guaranteed success. The superstar arrived at the competition with their usual charm. Cameras flashed, fans shouted, and the judges waited expectantly. The room was filled with excitement, a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. The superstar smiled, waving confidently. It was easy for them. This was not a new stage. They had performed in bigger arenas with larger crowds. This was just another audience, another opportunity to show their skill. Backstage, other contestants were preparing. Some were nervous, some were excited, and some were trying to stay calm. They had watched videos of the superstar, listened to their songs, and felt a little intimidated. The superstar noticed this and felt even more confident. It was clear to them that most people here had much less experience. They would perform, and the crowd would cheer. It was going to be simple, just like every other time. As the lights dimmed, the superstar stepped onto the stage. The audience roared with applause. The superstar raised their hand, acknowledging the cheers. They took a deep breath, feeling the familiar rush of energy. The first note came effortlessly. It was clear, strong, and powerful. The audience leaned forward, hanging on to every word. Every movement was graceful, every tone precise. It was a performance that only a superstar could deliver. Judges smiled. Fans clapped louder, and the room seemed to vibrate with excitement. The superstar felt the usual pride, a sense of satisfaction that came from knowing they were admired. They moved across the stage with confidence, finishing the song with a flourish. The audience erupted into applause, whistling, and shouting their names. It was perfect. Everything had gone exactly as expected. Backstage, the superstar thanked the judges and waved at fans who had gathered to watch. They were greeted with praise and admiration. The superstar felt invincible, as if nothing could shake their confidence. They had performed in front of thousands, but here in this smaller competition, it was easy. They were ready to face anyone. They believed in their talent so much that they were sure no one could challenge them. Yet, as the superstar prepared for the next round, whispers reached them. Judges talked quietly about a new contestant, a child who was supposed to perform soon. The superstar barely paid attention. A child. How could a child compete with years of experience and training? Still, curiosity made them glance toward the waiting area. There was a small figure, calmed and composed, holding a microphone. The superstar smiled faintly, thinking it would be a simple, innocent performance. They could not imagine that this child might change anything. The child's presence was gentle, almost unnoticeable at first. They did not demand attention. They did not wear flashy clothes or make loud gestures. Their eyes were focused, and there was a quiet determination in their posture. The superstar, used to grand entrances and dramatic performances, thought it was almost amusing. How could someone so small, so young, create any challenge? The child's turn was announced. The room quieted. The superstar felt a twinge of anticipation, but also amusement. They had faced difficult situations before. Competitors with strong voices, complex performances, and dramatic flair had tried to match them. None had succeeded. This child would be no different. They were confident, almost certain that the stage was theirs alone. As the child stepped forward, a hush fell over the audience. The superstar watched, expecting a simple, modest song. The first note came. It was soft, delicate, yet perfectly controlled. The audience leaned in, surprised by the clarity and precision. The child's voice was young, but carried an unusual depth and emotion. Every note seemed to reach straight into the hearts of the listeners. The superstar felt a flicker of surprise, but quickly shook it off, reminding themselves that experience always won in the end. The child continued to sing, and with every note, the audience's reaction grew. It was subtle at first, a few murmurs, quiet applause. But soon, it became louder, undeniable. The child's performance had a purity that demanded attention. There was no arrogance, no showiness, just a voice that conveyed emotion and skill beyond their years. The superstar watched, still trying to remain confident, but something inside them shifted slightly. They could feel the audience's admiration moving toward the child. The superstar had always been in control of every performance. They could read a crowd, anticipate reactions, and adjust effortlessly. But now, something unusual was happening. The audience's focus was moving. The superstar, used to being the center of attention, felt a strange sensation. It was unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and unsettling. They had faced critics, competitors, and challenges before. None had shaken their confidence like this. By the end of the song, the audience erupted. Applause, cheers, and whistles filled the room. The judges were stunned, exchanging glances of surprise. The child had done something extraordinary. It was not just talent. It was presence, emotion, and skill, wrapped in a small, unassuming package. The superstar felt a knot in their stomach. For the first time, they were not sure of the outcome. The child had achieved something that even years of experience could not guarantee. Backstage, Superstar took a deep breath, trying to process what had just happened. They had been confident, untouchable, and now a small child had captured the hearts of everyone. It was a new feeling, one they had never experienced before. Pride and confidence mingled with doubt and uncertainty. The superstar realized that talent could appear in unexpected ways. That experience alone was not always enough. As the competition continued, the superstar kept thinking about the child. Every movement, every note replayed in their mind. They had always believed that skill, practice, and stage presence made them unbeatable. But now, they faced a reality that challenged everything they knew. It was a humbling moment, a reminder that the world was bigger than their own fame and experience. The superstar decided to stay focused. They practiced harder, prepared more, and tried to regain their confidence. Yet the memory of the child's voice lingered. It was not just a performance. It was a statement, a challenge, and a reminder that talent could come from the most unexpected places. For the first time, the superstar wondered, could someone so young, so innocent, truly shake the foundations of their carefully built confidence? The night ended, but the story was just beginning. The superstar returned home thinking about the child, the competition, and the unexpected reality they had encountered. Fame, applause, and experience had always been enough, but now they understood that they could be challenged in ways they had never imagined. And somewhere in a quiet corner of the city, a child's voice had begun to change everything. The superstar knew that the journey ahead would be different, that confidence could no longer be taken for granted. They were about to learn a lesson in humility, talent, and the power of a single, extraordinary voice. The child was unlike anyone the superstar had ever seen. Small in size, with wide, curious eyes and a gentle smile, they carried themselves with quiet confidence. The child had not grown up in luxury or fame. Their world was simple, filled with small joys and everyday struggles, but music had always been their refuge. From the earliest age, the child discovered a voice that could reach into the hearts of anyone who listened. Singing was not about fame or applause. It was about expression. It's about telling stories with notes instead of words. The child's family had always encouraged them to follow their passion, even when resources were scarce. Lessons were hard to come by, and instruments were rare, but that never stopped the child. They practiced whenever they could, using an old keyboard at home or even singing along with songs played on a small radio. Every day, every note, and every melody became a step toward something bigger. The child believed in music the way others believed in air or water, essential, necessary, and deeply personal. When the opportunity to perform at the talent competition arose, the child's excitement was quiet but profound. They were nervous, of course, but more than anything, they were determined. This was not about winning a trophy or fame. This was a chance to share what had lived inside them for years. The child had listened to countless performers, admired singers, and dreamt about stages far larger than the small room where they had first learned to sing. Now, standing backstage, the child felt both small and enormous at the same times, small in the vast crowd, enormous in the power of their own voice. The other contestants were curious. Many were older, more experienced, or trained by famous coaches. Some looked at the child skeptically, whispering to each other. How could someone so young compete with them? The child, however, paid little attention to the doubts or whispers. Their focus was on the music, on the voice that had grown stronger with every practice, on the notes that had been carefully nurtured for years. Confidence did not come from arrogance, but from the quiet knowledge that what they had to offer was unique and real. As the child waited for their turn, they reflected on their journey. Singing had always been a source of comfort and expression. During difficult times, music had been the voice that carried them forward. When friends doubted them, or circumstances felt too heavy, the child sang. When family members were worried about finances, the child sang to bring a moment of joy. Every song had a memory, every melody a story. And now, this competition was simply another chapter, another story waiting to be told. When the announcer called the child's name, the room fell silent. Everyone waited, curious about what this young performer could bring. The superstar, seated in the front row, felt the shift immediately. The child's presence was subtle, almost understated, but there was a calm intensity in their eyes that caught attention. The audience sensed it too. Something was about to happen that was different from anything they had expected. The child stepped onto the stage with poise. No flashy entrance, no exaggerated gestures, just a simple, honest presence. The microphone was held gently, yet firmly, as if it were a bridge between the child's heart and the hearts of those listening. The first note rang out, pure and clear. It was not loud or showy, but it was precise and filled with emotion. The audience felt it immediately, a quiet power that demanded attention without demanding it, as the song continued. The child's control over their voice became apparent. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. The performance was not about impressing the judges with tricks or technical flair. It was about conveying a story, a feeling, a truth. Listeners could feel the emotion behind every word, the sincerity in every melody. The superstar, watching from the front, felt a twinge of unease. This was no ordinary performance. The child's voice had a quality that went beyond age or experience. The audience's reaction grew steadily. At first, there were murmurs of surprise. Then, quiet applause began to ripple through the room. By the middle of the performance, the room was captivated. People leaned forward, holding their breath, listening to every note. The judges exchanged glances, impressed and perhaps slightly astonished. The child's talent was undeniable, and it was impossible to look away. There was a depth in the performance that made the music feel alive. It's almost as if it were speaking directly to each person in the audience. Backstage, the superstar could feel the change. They were used to being the center of attention, to having the crowd hang on every word. But now, their usual certainty was shaken. The superstar had faced talented performers before, but there was something about this child that was different. It was not just skill, but authenticity. The child's voice was a reflection of their soul, and that honesty was powerful beyond measure. The child finished the song with a gentle, lingering note. The room stayed silent for a brief moment, as if time itself had paused. Then the applause erupted. It was not the polite clapping of a room that had been entertained. It was the raw, emotional response of people moved by something extraordinary. The child smiled softly, humble and grateful, bowing gently. There was no showmanship, no demand for attention, just gratitude, a quiet pride in what had been shared. The superstar felt a mixture of admiration and discomfort. For the first time, they experienced what it meant to be truly challenged. Confidence, they realized, was not only about skill, but also about connection. The child had connected with the audience in a way that was pure and natural, without any pretense. The superstar could feel the weight of that connection pressing against their own carefully built persona as the competition continued. The child's performance became a topic of conversation. Judges spoke of their control, their emotion, and the maturity of their voice. Other contestants, initially skeptical, now looked at the child with a mix of respect and awe. The superstar, who had entered the room with certainty and pride, now found themselves reflecting on every choice, every note, and every performance they had ever delivered. They began to understand that talent was not always predictable, that brilliance could emerge in the most unexpected forms. The child returned backstage, greeted with smiles and encouragement. They remained humble, sharing thanks with those who had helped them along the way. It was clear that their journey had been shaped by perseverance, support, and a deep love for music. The child's story was one of resilience, determination, and authenticity, qualities that had resonated in every note sung that day. In the following days, the child's performance became the highlight of the competition. Clips of the song circulated widely, praised not only for technical skill, but also for the emotional impact. The superstar, observing this from a distance, felt a mixture of pride and unease. They were proud to witness such talent. Yet they could not ignore the reality that their own position was being questioned not by fame, not by experience, but by the simple, genuine power of a child's voice. The superstar began to reflect on their own journey. They had always relied on hard work, practice, and a certain natural ability. Yet, the child reminded them of something crucial. Talent was not measured only by years or accolades, but by the ability to touch hearts. The superstar realized that there was room for growth, for humility, and for learning from others, no matter their age or status. Meanwhile, the child continued to prepare for the next stages of the competition. They practiced with the same quiet determination, focusing on expression and connection. Fame or attention was secondary. The goal was to communicate through music, to share something meaningful. Every performance was a chance to grow, to reach further into their own potential, and to inspire others along the way. The contrast between the superstar and the child became more evident. One had confidence born of experience and public recognition. The other had a quiet power that came from authenticity and passion. Both were talented, but in different ways. And as the competition moved forward, it was clear that the story was no longer just about winning. It was about the meeting of two extraordinary forms of talent, each teaching the other lessons about humility, growth, and the true meaning of connection. By the end of this stage of the competition, the The superstar had begun to understand that the child's voice had shifted something inside them. It was a gentle, unspoken lesson that brilliance could emerge from anywhere, and that true artistry was not about proving superiority, but about touching hearts. The superstar left the stage that day with a new perspective, quietly inspired and humbled, ready to face what lay ahead with a sense of curiosity and respect for the child, whose talent had opened their eyes to a new world of possibility. The day of the big performance arrived, and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Backstage, contestants adjusted their outfits, tuned their instruments, and took deep breaths. The superstar moved with confidence, accustomed to the rush of energy that came before stepping onto a stage. They had faced challenges before and had always emerged victorious. But today something felt different. There was a quiet energy in the room, a tension that seemed to hum beneath the surface. It came from the whispers about the child performer, whose reputation had begun to spread after the earlier rounds. The child waited patiently, calm and focused. They had rehearsed countless times, but the nerves of performing in front of such a large audience still sent a flutter through their chest. Yet, there was no fear in their eyes, only determination and a quiet readiness. Their love for music was stronger than any nervousness. Every practice, every song, every note had led to this moment. They stepped onto the stage with the poise of someone who had been there many times, though it was actually their first big stage performance. The spotlight fell on the child, and the audience quieted. All eyes were on them. The superstar, sitting in the front row, watched intently. This was not the first time they had seen talent. But there was a certain stillness, a profound calm in the child's presence that caught them off guard. The first note left the child's lips, pure and clear. It floated through the auditorium, filling every corner with its gentle, perfect resonance. The audience held its breath, mesmerized by the delicate, powerful sound. As the song unfolded, the child's voice carried emotion that seemed impossible for someone so young. There was depth, clarity, and control in every note. The melody rose and fell, painting pictures in the listeners' minds, evoking emotions that were unspoken yet universally understood. The audience was no longer just watching. They were experiencing. Each chord and each syllable was infused with a sincerity that transcended skill. Touching something deep in the heart, the superstar felt a strange sensation. They had performed countless times in front of huge crowds, and they knew the power of connection. But now, the connection they had always taken for granted seemed different. The audience's eyes were drawn not to them, but to the small figure on stage. They could see the astonishment, the wonder, and the unrestrained admiration spreading through the room. It was a moment of realization. The child's voice was not only technically flawless, but emotionally overwhelming. Every note the child sang seemed to expand, wrapping the room in its presence. The superstar's confident posture subtly shifted. They had faced talented singers before, but none had moved people so completely with such apparent ease. The child's voice was not loud or forceful, yet it carried an invisible weight that could not be ignored. The superstar could feel it pressing gently against the edges of their own certainty. They were used to being the center of attention, the standard by which others were measured. But now, the standard seemed to have shifted. The child's expression remained calm, focused on the music and the story it told. There was no desire for recognition, no attempt to outshine anyone. The performance was a dialogue between the child and the audience. A shared experience where emotion spoke louder than words. Each crescendo built not just on technique, but on meaning. And each soft passage offered an intimate moment that seemed to reach into the soul. The superstar watched, captivated and unsettled, as their previously unshakable confidence began to waver. By the middle of the performance, the audience was completely engaged. Some had tears in their eyes, some were smiling softly, and some were holding their breath. It was as if the child's voice had created an invisible bond between everyone present. The superstar felt an unfamiliar pang of vulnerability. They realized that talent was not only about mastery, practice, or fumet, was also about the power to communicate truthfully and touch hearts. The child had achieved that effortlessly. and it was both inspiring and unsettling. As the song reached its climax, the child's voice soared. Every note was precise, yet it carried a natural flow that made it seem effortless. The emotion behind the performance grew, capturing the audience in a spell of awe and wonder. The superstar could see the ripple of amazement spreading, the way people leaned forward, enchanted and absorbed. For the first time in a long career, the superstar felt something new, a sense of being overshadowed. Not by arrogance or competition, but by raw, undeniable talent. The final note lingered in the air, soft and haunting, and then there was silence. For a moment, no one moved. The room seemed suspended in time, the echo of the voice still present in every listener's mind. Then the applause erupted. It was a wave of sound that washed over the child and the audience alike, spontaneous, unrestrained, and filled with pure admiration. The child bowed, simple and sincere, acknowledging the appreciation without seeking it. They had shared something real, and the audience had felt it deeply. The superstar sat frozen for a moment, absorbing what had just happened. They had been captivated, humbled, and shaken by a performance that had been quiet, simple, and profound. For the first time, they understood that no amount of fame or experience could guarantee supremacy. Talent could emerge in the most unexpected forms, and brilliance was not always measured by years or accolades, but by the capacity to move hearts. Backstage, whispers of amazement spread among the other contestants. Many had been skeptical about the child at first, but now there was respect, awe, and admiration. People who had doubted, who had been competitive, now watched with quiet reverence. The child had done something extraordinary, but by being flashy, but by being authentic. Every gesture, every note, every pause was deliberate, yet it felt completely natural. As though the performance was an extension of the child's very being, the superstar began to feel a mix of emotions. Pride in witnessing such talent, yes, but also a pang of insecurity. They had always believed in their own abilities. But now they were forced to confront the reality that there could be someone, anyone, who could challenge their position not through arrogance or showmanship, but through pure, undeniable skill and heart. The superstar realized that they had never experienced such vulnerability before. It was both uncomfortable and illuminating. The child's performance quickly became the talk of the competition. Judges praised the clarity, control, and emotional depth of the voice. Media coverage described it as extraordinary, noting the maturity and authenticity that seemed impossible for someone so young. Clips of the performance spread widely, capturing not just technical perfection, but the emotional resonance that had moved everyone present. The superstar, while proud to witness such talent, could not ignore the truth they had been shaken. Confidence, they realized, was not invincible. It could be tested, challenged, and even shattered by the right combination of skill, emotion, and authenticity. The superstar reflected on every performance they had given, comparing them to what they had just witnessed. They recognized a truth that was both humbling and motivating. Talent was not a fixed measure, and mastery did not make one untouchable. There was always someone out there who could redefine expectations, who could remind them of the limitless possibilities of human ability. In this case, that someone was a child. Small in stature, but monumental in talent. As the competition progressed, the child continued to perform with the same quiet confidence. Every song, every note, and every expression was deliberate, heartfelt, and sincere. Fame or attention was secondary. What mattered was the connection between the voice and the listener. Each performance deepened the impression they had already made, solidifying their place not just as a contestant, but as a truly remarkable talent capable of inspiring and moving others. The superstar, meanwhile, felt a subtle transformation within themselves. Their previous confidence had been shaken, but it was also replaced with a new understanding. They had witnessed the raw, authentic power of music, the way it could cross barriers of age, experience, and expectation. They realized that being a true artist was not only about skill or fame, but about the ability to move others, to communicate truth, and to touch hearts. The child had reminded them of something fundamental that even they had sometimes forgotten by the end of the performance. The child had achieved something extraordinary. They had captivated the audience, impressed the judges, and created a lasting impression on everyone present, including the superstar. The applause continued long after the final note, a testament to the power of sincerity and the depth of talent. The superstar felt a mixture of awe, respect, and reflection. This was not a simple competition anymore. It was a moment of revelation, a turning point that would stay with them for a long time. As the child left the stage, they were met with smiles, congratulations, and quiet admiration from fellow contestants and audience members. They remained humble, acknowledging the support they had received along the way. Their journey was far from over, but this performance had already made a mark. It's not just on the competition, but on the hearts and minds of everyone who had listened. The superstar, watching from their seat, understood that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one in which talent, authenticity, and the power to inspire could no longer be measured solely by fame or experience. The superstar left the theater that day with a new perspective. Their confidence had been tested, shaken, but also renewed in a different way. They had learned that humility and respect were essential parts of greatness, that true artistry came from touching others, and that brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places. A child's voice had challenged everything they thought they knew, and in doing so, it had opened their eyes to a deeper understanding of talent, human connection, and the beauty of authentic expression. The night after the performance, the superstar could not sleep. The images and sounds of the child's performance replayed constantly in their mind. Every note, every pause, every emotion seemed to echo in the quiet of their room. They were used to performing in front of thousands and leaving them amazed, yet now they felt a strange emptiness. Confidence, which had always been steady and unshakable, now felt fragile. The superstar realized, with a mixture of pride and discomfort, that the child had achieved something beyond technical skill. They had connected with people in a way that was pure, unpretentious, and deeply moving. The next day, Superstar arrived at the studio for interviews and rehearsals, but their usual charm felt forced. Journalists asked about the competition and the child who had captivated the audience. Questions were polite, curious, and filled with admiration. The superstar smiled, gave rehearsed answers, but inside, thoughts kept returning to that small, powerful voice. They had faced difficult competitors before, but no one had stirred them like this child. There was something unsettling in the idea that raw, authentic talent could emerge from the most unexpected place. Backstage at the next round of the competition, the atmosphere was tense. Contestants practiced in quiet corners, others talked softly about the previous day's performances. The child moved through the space with calm and confidence, greeting others politely and returning to their preparations. There was no arrogance, no desire to dominate. The child's focus remained on the music, on conveying the feelings behind each note. Those who had doubted them now looked at the child with quiet respect, understanding that this was not just another young contestant, it was someone extraordinary. The superstar watched from the sidelines, observing the child's preparation and focus. They noticed the subtle ease in their posture, the controlled breathing, and the quiet intensity in their eyes. The superstar realized that what they had once taken for granted in their own career, the ability to captivate, inspire, and command attention, was now being mirrored by someone much younger, someone without fame or experience. The realization was humbling and at times disquieting. Confidence, they understood, could be challenged in ways they had never anticipated. Rehearsals began, and the superstar tried to focus. They went through familiar routines, ran through scales and warm-ups, and practiced their songs meticulously. Yet, every note they sang seemed to echo differently now. The memory of the child's voice lingered in their mind, subtle yet insistent. For the first time, the superstar felt a shift. Their usual assurance was replaced with careful consideration, with an awareness that talent and impact were not always predictable. They were learning, perhaps reluctantly, that greatness could come from unexpected places, during breaks. The superstar found themselves reflecting on their own journey. They had worked hard, trained long hours, and faced countless challenges. Fame had come with effort, discipline, and perseverance. Yet, the child's performance reminded them that success was not only about skill or experience, but also about authenticity, connection, and the ability to convey truth. The superstar began to appreciate a new dimension of artistry, one that required humility, openness, and respect for talent in all its forms. The day of the next performance arrived. The audience filled the auditorium, buzzing with excitement and curiosity. The superstar walked on stage with their usual poise, but inside, a subtle tension remained. The child would perform later, and the superstar could not ignore the anticipation building in the room. Every eye would watch, every ear would listen. They had performed countless times, but this was different. This was a moment that could redefine perceptions, challenge assumptions, and remind everyone, including the superstar, of the unpredictable nature of talent. The superstar's performance was strong, polished, and full of emotion. The audience responded with applause and cheers, but the superstar noticed something new. The energy of the room was shifting, not entirely their own. People were watching, waiting, wondering what would come next. The superstar felt a mix of pride and unease. They were performing at the top of their ability, but the memory of the child's voice remained vivid. It was impossible to ignore the impact the child had made, a reminder that brilliance was not the sole domain of experience or fame. When the child stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. The superstar, watching from the front row, felt a strange sense of anticipation, almost like a heartbeat in the air. The child began to sing, and immediately the audience leaned forward, drawn in by the clarity and emotion of the voice. Every note was deliberate, precise, and yet infused with a natural flow that made it feel effortless. The superstar observed carefully, noting the ease and sincerity with which the child commanded attention. It was a performance that transcended age, stage, and expectation. As the song progressed, the superstar felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride, admiration, and humility, blended with a subtle sense of insecurity. They recognized that this child was not just talented, but transformative. The voice carried emotion, storytelling, and presence beyond its years. The superstar realized that the child's impact was not just about skill, it was about connection, authenticity, and the ability to touch hearts in ways that were deeply human. Every note resonated not only with the audience but with the superstar, shaking their sense of invincibility. Backstage conversations centered on the child's performance. Contestants shared their amazement, talking quietly about how someone so young could possess such control and expression. Judges praised the depth, maturity, and authenticity of the voice. The superstar, however, reflected silently, aware that the child had not only impressed the audience but also challenged their own perception of artistry and confidence. It was a humbling experience, one that made them reconsider what it meant to be truly talented. In the following days, the superstar noticed changes in themselves. Their usual confidence had been tempered by a new awareness. They approached rehearsals differently, with more focus on emotional expression rather than just technical mastery. They listened more carefully to feedback, observed other performers with curiosity, and reflected on the nuances of connecting with an audience. The child had inadvertently become a teacher, offering a lesson in humility and authenticity through their own quiet brilliance. The media caught wind of the story, highlighting the child's extraordinary talent and the effect it had on both the audience and the superstar. Articles described the performance as transformative, noting how a single voice had captured the hearts of thousands and challenged one of the most celebrated artists of the time. The superstar read these articles with mixed feelings: pride, humility, and a sense of challenge. It was clear that the child had made an indelible mark, not only on the competition but on everyone who had witnessed their talent. The superstar's team noticed the change as well. They observed that rehearsals were different, that focus had shifted, and that there was a new openness in the superstar's approach to music and performance. Conversations were deeper, reflections more thoughtful, and preparation more thorough. The superstar had always been dedicated, but now their dedication was infused with humility and a desire to learn from the unexpected. The child's influence was subtle, yet powerful, shaping not only the competition, but also the superstar's understanding of true artistry. Meanwhile, the child continued to prepare with the same quiet determination. They practiced, refined, and focused on expressing emotion through every note. Fame and recognition were not priorities. The goal was to communicate through music, to share the depth of feeling that had been nurtured for years. The child's humility and sincerity made them even more remarkable, demonstrating that extraordinary talent could coexist with a grounded, human-centered approach to life and art. As the competition progressed, the superstar and the child's paths continued to intertwine. Each performance, each round, and each audience reaction served as a lesson in growth, reflection, and understanding. The superstar learned to approach each performance with renewed focus, humility, and openness. The child, in turn, gained confidence and experience, navigating the challenges of the stage while remaining true to themselves. The dynamic between them was subtle, unspoken, yet powerful, a reminder that talent and human connection could transcend age, experience, and expectation. The aftermath of the performance also revealed something deeper. The superstar began to notice how much they had taken their own abilities for granted. Confidence had always been steady, almost unshakable, but it had lacked the depth of empathy and understanding that comes from witnessing raw talent and authentic expression. The child's voice, humble yet powerful, had opened a new door, teaching the superstar that true greatness was not just measured by skill or recognition, but by the ability to touch lives, inspire hearts, and evoke genuine emotion. Over time, the superstar's perspective shifted further. They began to engage with other performers differently, offering encouragement, guidance, and support where appropriate. They listened more intently, observed more closely, and appreciated the individuality of each voice. The child had shown them that brilliance was not a competition to be won, but a gift to be shared and celebrated. This realization reshaped the superstar's approach to music, to performance, and to life.